5.
Now, it's been 2 weeks of a thrilling break here on the News Gang. And as we say, welcome back. I'm tempted to add, this is a Where Were You edition. While you were away, trees were shaken, snakes were hunted for their venom, and if you'd never heard about it, hyenas too carry some really vital body parts. And while you were away, our favorite common couple was at it again. I tell you, it was noisy, messy, and chaotic one weekend. No one could even sleep a wink in the entire neighborhood. Same old stuff, actually. Usual references to infidelity, that snide old line about virility, and yes, that squabble over paternity tests resurfaced again. And while you were away, the town was awash with promises. All 4 presidential candidates have now released their manifestos ahead of the August 9th general election. But the road is getting bumpy for the IEBC. With just 32 days left to the polls, court orders are throwing the electoral body into a spin, even as it takes hostile fire from political players that feel the IEBC has not gotten their act together just yet. On Gashuri's Punchline, the youth take a punch in the face for an opportunity missed way in advance. Jamila's memo bears a London dateline and tales of a prime minister who would pass for a Kenyan. Kaikai's Kicker has some advice about sitting properly. And on My Take, good or bad manners play by the rule of gravity. They flow from the top to the bottom. Good evening. This is News Gang, and we're back.
An election is a process. So if you mess up in the midst of that process, you're actually messing up with the whole election. This election is already bungled.
The court has pronounced itself on this matter that the whole process was unconstitutional.
The law does not act retrospectively. If it did, then the judge ought to have specifically ordered and directed the commission to register those persons who did not qualify for want of compliance with those regulations. But there is no such a positive order directing the commission to clear those aspirants. So the law applies moving forward, and the commission is guided.
Welcome back. Now, of course, the hashtag is NewsGang, and you can talk to us at Citizen TV Kenya. So, ladies, gentlemen, it's good to see you all back here after a bit of a 2-week break. And so much has happened. So I want to start, of course, with the election preparations. And like we said at the start, it's, you know, sort of one court case after another. The very latest being the one by Justice Mrima. On the manner in which the presidential candidates were cleared. Gashuri, let me start with you because you covered this story and you did it. Let's just start first by understanding, you know, who took the matter to court and what were their specific prayers? Well,
it was a consolidated case because there were various cases that had been filed, and so they were consolidated into one. There were 18 petitioners, among them 5 presidential aspirants who were kicked out of the process by IEBC for various reasons. Some because they didn't submit a running mate in good time, but predominantly those who were kicked out because they did not meet the requirement for submission of at least 48,000 signatures accompanied by copies of identity cards that were used by the registered voters supporting their presidential bids to register as voters. So these presidential aspirants were required by the regulations that had been set out by the commission to provide these not less than 48,000 copies of IDs of registered voters who are supporting their bid, meaning 2,000 signatures and copies of identity cards from registered voters in at least 24 counties. A good number of them were unable to do that. And so Judge Anthony Mrima in that verdict was saying that IEBC, one, treated the presidential aspirants who are vying as independent differently from those vying or sponsored by political parties. On the second part, he was arguing that IEBC is already a custodian of registration details of the registered voters. That is, their ID numbers, copies of their IDs. And so there was no need of asking the presidential aspirants to go out there and get the same copies, the same documents, to come and bring them to IEBC. Thirdly, he ruled that IEBC, I mean, the presidential aspirants were not legally, did not have the legal grounding to go out there and seek personal details of the registered voters. And also questions about the Data Protection Act. One, how was IEBC going to use this information that is obtained from the registered voters? How long would they use it? And in the event of disposal, how would that information be disposed? That was basically some of the issues that he raised in that verdict. But on the other hand, IEBC says that judgment does not apply retroactively. It acts moving forward, so they can't go back. Yep. They have appealed, a notice of appeal has been filed by the commission. And essentially, these presidential aspirants who were not allowed to contest had a protest at IEBC. And they're saying they want the 4 presidential candidates who have been cleared by IEBC, that process quashed first, and that IEBC goes back to the entire process again, afresh.
And does it afresh.
And does it afresh. Now, without requirement for them to submit these details, I mean, these registration details, because they argue that the slate is clean, so start again. All these 32 days to the general election. Essentially, if they were to be allowed, then probably you would end up with a ballot paper that has about 26 people, because, I mean, those who are saying they were barred from contesting on those accounts were about 22, 23. So add plus the 4, that would be about 27. And they also claim that they have been denied an opportunity to campaign, like their co-contenders. So then they say, give us more time.
Quality and fairness.
So what does that mean? For an election that is coming up in 32 days, if you are to give them ample time to campaign, then it will mean postponement of the general election. Very tight matters. But let's hear what the Court of Appeal will say.
Indeed, Jamila.
Yvonne, some of the issues that came up when that ruling was made by Justice Mrima, by those candidates or those aspirants, they're not candidates who went to court, was that they wanted the chairman of the IEBC to resign, saying that he failed to interpret the law correctly. They also wanted him to quash the nomination. I mean, to quash the clearance of the 4 candidates who are the presidential candidates, saying it was not done according to the law. They're saying they need to stop the whole process, print the ballot papers afresh. As Gachuri said, in short, he's saying, musongeshe hii kitu mbele. And I think for me that really is, I don't know what word to use. We are national television. But in some instances, I think it's a bit selfish in terms of what these aspirants want. Yes, we have freedom of democracy in this country. Anyone who wants to run for president can, not even just for president, for any seat, they can, so long as they meet the requirements that have been set. But Yvonne, we are 32 days to the elections, a date that is gazetted. It's by law. Second Tuesday of the 5th year.
Right.
This falls on 9th of August this year. We've had campaigns going on. We've had other aspirants, leave alone the presidential 40-something or so. We have the thousands who have been campaigning, who have spent time, who have spent resources, who have gone through nomination processes, who have printed T-shirts and banners, who've gone around the country trying to get votes, not just, again, the presidential, the ones who are running for governor's seat, the Senate seat, the member of parliament, the woman rep. There are 6 seats that are being contested. And then you come here and you start saying that, oh, we feel aggrieved and think that this whole thing should be postponed or pushed ahead because of a few people. Yvonne, I don't know, I may get backlash for this, but if these aspirants wawekwe pamoja wote, tell me how many votes they would get. Would there be enough votes to cause maybe a runoff? Or is this just, in my humble opinion, I think it's just a waste of time, and I think it's a bit selfish of them. They've gone to court. I mean, once you have been denied by the IEBC because of not ticking all the boxes, which have been put there by law, so, because otherwise all of us would go and want to run for president if there were not all these conditions that have to be set. Na hujapita, umetafuta mara ya kwanza ukaona haiwezekani, so uachie hapo, tuendelee mbele. There is so much that needs to be done between now and August 9th. The first batch of ballot papers have arrived in the country finally. And we're expecting, according to the Commission, to have more coming in until the end of this month. And this is not being done somewhere here in an industrial area. This is being printed, I think, in Greece.
In Greece.
And there are all these processes that they have to go through. It's not just printing a ballot paper is a process that is complex. It involves things like proofreading.
The tail end of
yeah, and I think even commissioners have to travel there. And, you know, all these things, people's names and pictures and the right constituency and all those things. Because I think the batches that have come in today have come in pellets, what they call pellets, 128 of them.
Yeah.
They are packed per constituency.
Yeah, and
it's hard to tell how many are in it. But my point is this. It is not easy to just go and print ballot papers. You're not doing it somewhere here around the corner. It's in Greece. It's a process that will take time. It's intense. And there's a security bit of it. You know, questions come up about this security features of the ballot papers. That also is a process in its own. So in my opinion, ili kupotezea watu wakati.
Jamila, where is your helmet?
I hope you have it on. But, you know, some of them are saying this is about process and, you know, that an election is not an event and it's a process. Linus, your thoughts on that and legal hurdles. This seems fairly similar to 2017 when the IEBC faced several legal challenges, you know, some right up until the very last minute. And I suppose this would count as the last minute when it comes to, you know, preparations for an election.
That's right, and this is because there are aspirants who also know that there can be a route through the court to the ballot paper. And that route would normally be a lot easier because when you look at what the directions the court has given, it just stopped short of actually giving that declaration that include these appellants in the ballot for 2022, which is what the IEBC will now have to exploit and say, no, first of all, there's no specific order compelling the IEBC to include those who went to court in the present ballot paper. But also, too, you've seen the advocate of the IEBC saying it won't apply retroactively. You have to wait. We have been guided by the court. And maybe in 2027 or in the next by-election, if there is one, we'll be able to comply. But look, there's something, of course, about our courts. And our courts are a space where, basically, you're supposed to have rights. And it doesn't matter how late in the day, even if the election is in a few days' time, and if you think your rights are infringed, the principle of the court is to listen to you. They'll listen to that. It's never too late to address what they consider a wrong. But politically, when you look at what is happening, it's a judgment that potentially opens the space for what I would call backpack political tourism, where people who don't do a lot in terms of really digging deep into what it takes to be president will take a shortcut. You know, avoid the 2000, avoid section 20, I think 23 or 23 of the Election Act that requires that you raise at least 2,000 signatures.
Yeah, or supporters from 24 counties.
Yeah, from at least 24 counties. Right. You can do 47 if you can.
Yeah.
Most bigger candidates actually do that. So this is such an adventurous kind of direction because the appellants here are looking for the shortest route to the ballot paper. And the way to and that route could come through a judgment like this.
But, you know, here's the interesting thing. Most of the ones who are affected by this were the independent candidates. And I think they cried foul quite a bit during the process, you know, and even after. And in fact, it was a good number of them that were then disqualified from the process to the extent that we do not have an independent candidate running for president, at least of the four. They're all from political parties. And we did talk about that around this table and just, you know, what that meant in terms of independent candidates, whether they're, they come ready to present their bids, whether they follow the law. But now they're claiming that there was, in fact, not just preferential treatment for the others, but that there was discriminatory, treatment towards them. In fact, I recall hearing Reuben Kigame, was it yesterday, saying that Wafula Chebukati is hostile, he's not friendly, he's... and I think several other words to that effect. So this really is the battle of the independents, if you like. I mean, I know there's Okuru Akot who's in the Third Way Alliance, but this really was a thing of the independents, because there were, 26 petitioners, 23 of whom were presidential, but a good number of them were independents. Absolutely.
And you remember initially there were 47 independent aspirants for the presidential seat. Then they reduced to 46. When the list was taken to IEBC, those are the ones who obtained clearance from the Registrar of Political Parties. Yeah. And we discussed that matter right here on the News Gang. And when the list was taken to IEBC, some of them were disqualified very, very early because some could not submit a running mate in good time. Some submitted running mates who are members of political parties and so on and so forth. So the difficult journey for the independent aspirants or independent candidates, if you may like, especially for the presidential seat, began way early. And you could see right from the beginning it was going to be very difficult for them to maneuver all these steps. Now the question is, if this matter ends up at the Court of Appeal, you will see a scenario where the 4 presidential candidates will be listed among the parties in that case. Interested parties. So maybe this is one of the very few times you will see the 4 presidential candidates teaming up or uniting at least in one issue, because what is potentially targeting them is quashing the clearance that they got from IEBC and saying, let's go back afresh. That being the case, then you will also talk about postponing a general election. I doubt any of them would agree, bearing in mind that quite an amount of time has been spent campaigning. Resources have been spent campaigning, energy and everything else. Actually, you want this process to end so that Kenyans go to the ballot to make a determination whether you will become president or not. So an attempt maybe to take you back, which means more resources, more time, more energy. Probably this is one of the few times that the presidential candidates, especially the 2 perceived leading ones, will unite, like they did not so long ago during the pushing a little bit of the naming of a running mate. You remember that discussion? So I foresee a scenario where the independent candidates will try and push on, but this is one very rare opportunity where IEBC and the 4 presidential candidates will team up against the independent aspirants.
With 32 days to go, I mean, let's talk timelines here. Of course, the court is very aware of what's coming up in 32 days. So it's the Court of Appeal that has to listen to this. If one or both parties is not pleased, then there's the Supreme Court. And in all this time, there's ballot papers that need to be printed. There's an election that's coming up. There's campaigns that are still, ongoing. So we really have to see a quick conclusion of this matter. Exactly, and that's true. And I remember we went for a meeting there a couple of weeks back, and the Chief Justice said they'd constituted specific judges to listen to any cases that will come before them in regards to the elections. So they are heard and determined and in good time. But still, Yvonne, we're still really, really cutting it close. Despite the issues that are raised by the aspirants, there's also some court cases that are still yet to be determined, especially those that involve a Nairobi candidate for UDA, the governor's seat, Johnson Sakaja, and former Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko, who is in Mombasa, wants to vie for the gubernatorial seat in Mombasa on a Wiper ticket. The court in Mombasa has ordered the IEBC not to print ballot papers until the matter is heard and determined. We are hoping that we'll get a judgment tomorrow. But still now that's another setback in terms of what the IEBC can do in printing the ballot papers. Yesterday they said that they intend to print the ballot papers for the presidential candidates between 15th and 20th of July. And I think they're hoping by then they'll have finished all these other ones. Wasalia na hizo. Yeah, but that's like 8 days away. That's really cutting it very close. So that's hoping that the Court of Appeal hears the matter, and then if anybody wants to appeal at the Supreme Court, that will all be heard and determined in 8 days? Yeah, because they need to have done this by 29th of July. We should have the last batch of ballot papers arriving in this country ready for an election 9 days later, Yvonne. That is if the independent candidates have anything to say, because I'm sure they want it postponed to much later. Linus.
Yeah, look, the court is guided by both the law and reason.
Yeah.
The court is very much aware that on the 9th of August, as per the Constitution, the country will go to elections. The 5 years will have lapsed, and we need to go to another election. And this reason will increasingly be seen to be applied in the handling of some of these cases that are coming up right now. The court will exercise that reason.
Yeah.
The court will show that awareness of the timelines and all that. It's not going to be blind to the fact that we have an election on the 9th. And then again, it has to play the game of balance of rights. I mean, do the rights of the so-called independent candidates then trump the rights of either the other 4 or even the 22 million voters that are expected to vote on the 9th of August. So I expect this to be dealt with in a very, very quick way, and in a short time the country will be back on track for the 9th.
In what we call a time yes.
And one question as you got the next point.
Yes.
Where have these aspirants been for the past 5 years? Wamekuwa wapi? Hata tuseme the past 2 years. Okay, but the past 1 year. Honestly.
Your helmet. Hope you have it on tonight. Let's talk about another.
Jamila, I'm afraid sitting next to you may be detrimental to my health.
You might get stray bullets.
Yeah,
stray fire. But listen, here's another battlefront. When it comes to the election, so obviously the Mrima ruling is one. There's a notice of appeal. We'll see how that goes. But then there is another battlefront, and this one is also taking place. It's actually taking place, on the political front, on the campaign trail, and that is the manual versus biometric. So do we use the biometric KIEMS register only, or do we have a manual as a backup? Now, before we discuss this and where it actually originated, because this is all about something that happened in 2017. Can we listen to Chebukati on his thoughts on the electronic versus the manual voter register?
Was we proceed to print the register, but we await the outcome of the court as to the way forward on the matter of physical register versus the digital register. But what I've seen in the media is the opposite of that. Maybe we need to have that conversation again, because at this rate, then we are not waiting for the court case. We are having conversations through public rallies, and then the commission is put in a situation where we really don't know what to say. But I thought we said, let's print the register, wait for the court determination, then we follow through. If we can't wait for the court case, then I'm sure we can come up with a solution one way or another.
So like he says, we are having this conversation again. This was a 2017 Court of Appeal ruling, and I believe at that time it was the ODM party that...
It was NASA.
Yes, as part of the NASA Alliance or NASA coalition, that had an issue with the use of both registers. Gashri, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it boils down to one word for me: mistrust. Nothing else. Mistrust of the electoral process and the electoral players. What do I mean by that? You see, the situation in 2017, when NASA then went to court, the team was pushing for an electronic process, identification of voters and transmission of results. Because the situation then was that maybe the manual voter register would be used to infiltrate the process and do a bit of ballot stuffing, in the sense that those who don't come to the polling stations physically, there would be a scenario where their names would be used to vote. And actually, you remember during the political campaigns then, was that kuna watu watatoka kwa makaburi, waende wapige kura, alafu warudi.
Yeah.
You see? And I think it's a whole question of mistrust. This is a scenario where the Court of Appeal provided for a complementary system. Now, first of all, the argument here is not that we as a country, abandon the electronic mode of identification of voters and resort to manual. The argument is that, yes, the primary process is identification of voters electronically. But side by side, have a manual voter register that in the event this electronic process fails, then you can resort to the manual document to identify voters. And the argument is that in 2013 and 2017, there are some places where the KIMS kits failed. Fact. Right. There are some places where they failed. Yep. And the fear is, deductively, if 2013 they failed, if 2017 they failed, there's a possibility 2022 they would fail.
Yeah.
Now, this is a question of whether it's a technical issue or whether it is a failure that is engineered in one way or another. And that's why I talk about mistrust, because if there was a trust of the process, if the players were trusting each other, then you would have no problem. Because in any case, Yvonne, voting is manual. Yes. I mean, you go there,
the registration
you're given the ballot papers physically, manually, you go and fill manually, you vote, you cast the ballots manually. Now, there are only two processes that you would say are electronic: the identification of voters and the transmission of results. And in any case, even once votes have been counted, the pronouncement on who has gotten what number of votes is manual, because you will hear it being said there. The forms will be filled, and that form is supposed even to be pinned on the wall, and people can see it. I think it's largely a question of trust. IEBC has tried to explain that we will have an alternative, a complementary method that is also electronic in nature, but these 6 kits will be available per ward. 46,232 polling stations and another 11,000 or so kits that will be used as standby kits or in per ward, 6 per ward. Now, the question that comes in is, what if you have a scenario where the kits totally fail in a ward that is expansive, that has multiple polling stations? So how will you deploy the 6 kits across the ward? So there's an arguable case there. But on the other hand, IEBC is trying to give an assurance that even in the event that the one kit fails, it is possible to remove the SD card and plug it into another kit, and you will still get the details. In any case, you just key in the identity card details, and the name will pop up, and you'll be able to identify whether this is the same person or not. And lastly, that the voter register that is manual will be generated from the electronic voter register. It boils down to one thing: mistrust. Nothing else. Yeah. If the players were trusting the process and trusting the referee, wouldn't have this kind of a discussion.
Yeah, before we come back and hear from Jamila and Linus, I want us to hear from Professor Guliye on just that. Let's say I'm talking about how this emanated from a court order in 2017, and of course how this time they will be having 6 substitute KIMS kits.
Is abiding by a Court of Appeal ruling which was in 2017, and that ruling was as a result of some people having gone to court, and there was a contestation around a manual register and a digital register. A ruling was made at that time that the primary register to be used is the digital register. This was in 2017. And that in the event of technology failure, meaning the KIMS kit did not work, the Commission has doubled the number of spare kits in every ward. Instead of 3 in 2017, now we have 6. So all that the PO will do is to notify the returning officer, the ARO, and the ARO will make arrangements for a kit to be delivered to start the process. And all they will do is just remove the SD card and insert in the new kit, and things will run. So for us, we do not see what is the problem. If your fingers cannot identify you, we will use your ID card to search for your details. If you are in the register, in the digital register, you will vote. There is no way you will be missing in the digital register and you will be available in the paper register. because we said they are one and the same. So we only revert to the digital, the paper register, in the event that even the backup kit has failed. And there is no other alternative kit to be provided as a substitute.
So, a very comprehensive, explanation there. But Linus, really, the ghosts of 2017, coming back to haunt IEBC and them having to deal with that, but then also at the same time deal with what is a political issue as well, to be honest.
I want to go to the point made by Francis earlier about mistrust. And, there has to be a background to that kind of mistrust. Professor Gulia has given a very logical explanation. It's absolutely convincing.
It makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. That is how it ought to work.
Except?
But here is the fact about the Kenyan political context. We have exhausted the systems. We started off with a manual. And, you can go all the way back to the Mlolongo system of 1988, where KANU, the only party at the time, decided that for a free and fair election, do it in an open field. Let people line up behind their preferred candidates. It's called Mlolongo. And everybody lined up behind their own candidates. But somehow, the length of the queue never really decided the winner. It's not really necessarily the longest queue that decided the winner. And so that was abandoned. Now we went to secret ballot. Vote. The vote will be counted, and then the results will be released. And in the 92 election, and I think 97 election, the system was such that you vote, and then the boxes are sealed at the polling station and taken to one center for counting, and that was the constituency. Counting was never done in the polling station. It was done at the constituency. So there was this transportation of ballot boxes to the polling center, to the
tallying center.
I also add that the ballot boxes were black.
They were black, opaque, so you don't know what's in there. You don't know what is inside there. And in fact, you will be surprised with what was inside the ballot box when the counting now began. Because stories were all over the place about what used to happen. They will go to some place and then change the boxes, stuff, bring the ones that are stuffed, and then take them to the counting. So a popular candidate suddenly realizes that they are not really popular when it comes to the ballot. That was stage number 2. Then we decided, oh, that one is not working. Let's count the ballots at the polling station. So each polling station was considered a tallying center, where you actually count and announce the results that so-and-so has gotten this much and this much. And I want us to acknowledge that it worked the first time, which was 2002. It produced,
and the ballot boxes were transparent, by the way.
Transparent, so counted at the polling station. So it was one of the most transparent, literally, elections that we've ever had in 2002. So it was a bit hard. It was supposed to make rigging hard. Then that's 2002. Now we decided, okay, that has worked. We tried the same in 2007. We all know how it ended. Although we counted at the polling station, there was this new animal called the National Tallying Center, where results are not really valid until they are seen by the national tallying, the presidential tallying returning officer, who sits at the Bomas of Kenya or Anniversary Towers, receives these results from all over the place, and then now certifies them as the results. And then in 2007, what happened was some results would come and retallying will be done at the KICC, and there was a disparity. And one time there's a video that I would refer a lot Kenyans to of the then Eldoret North Member of Parliament, William Ruto, taking us through the differences, the disparities in the votes that were cast in Molo and were announced at KICC, votes that were cast in near Francis's home. That is Juja. And how different they were from what was in Juja and what was at the National Tallying Center in KICC. Tharaka Nithi as well, the famous Tharaka Nithi. That was 2007. Because now, if you do not agree with what is coming from the polling station, then you can amend at the
National Tallying Center.
The National Tallying Center. And this is what informed now the effort to sanitize the process at the polling station. And it took another maybe 5-6 years because the case by Maina Kiai, that the results are final, at the polling stations are final, was only granted pre the 2017 election. Before that, we struggled with it because in 2013 again, Ukarabati was said to be there. Remember the election of 2013, the 50+1 was decided by a paltry 8,000 votes. 8,000 votes, which, if you consider the court of the Supreme Court petition that was filed by CORD at the time, the number of votes that were in question were way more than 8,000. But you remember the funny tallying that was supposed to take place at KICC. So our elections are littered with questions and suspicions. 2013 also, you know, strictly speaking, I don't know whether anybody can say that it was proved that we had a 50+1. Then 2017, Maina Kiai's decision from the court sanitized the place and said, no, the results will be final as announced at the polling station. At the polling station. So, and then electronic transmission also was made the primary mode of transmission. You must transmit it electronically. That was brought to treat and cure the problem of 2007, where Kivuitu said he doesn't know where his returning officers are, or I don't know whether they're cooking numbers. So the results now were supposed to come through a safe stream, electronic technology, deliver it to the National Tallying Center and announce them. They are final as they are coming from the polling stations. That was 2017. Now, but we know how it went. How it went now is a lot of games were then played at the electronic space. First of all, and we must be truthful with Kenyans, Chris Msando dies. Chris Msando, the IT manager of the IEBC, dies a few days before the election. Why did Chris Msando have to die before the elections? Why is Kenya never answering that question? What did it have any relationship with how we then proceeded to conduct the election in as far as the electronic question is concerned?
Which became a big issue at the Supreme Court.
Which is mandatory, yes.
And which became a big issue at the Supreme Court.
Yes, it became a big, and the election was nullified.
Correct.
Because, and I'm trying to explain the genesis of the mistrust. We used to trust the manual. Games were played, we distrusted it and turned to electronic. We now have games in the electronic space, so we are saying, okay, can we find a balance? Between the if there are games in the electronic space, how do you cure that with a manual process? Just the other day, one of the local dailies ran a big story about IT gurus in the respective Azimio and Kenya Kwanza team. Why are they important? What is that heroism about? Why? I mean, look at the highlighting of that story. It is specifically because of how we've conducted elections in 2013 and 2017. Electronic transmission of results did not pass the integrity test in 2013 and did not pass the test of integrity as proved by the Supreme Court in 2017. Which is why people are now saying, okay, if there are games there, how do we cure that with a manual option? Because these people, they know that there are things that transpired on the electronic space that if you do not mitigate with an alternative, then you can end up in the same space. I want to give the one last illustration, and that is the rerun of the presidential election. You remember the rerun in October, the repeat election in October? Yeah, one candidate only taking part, and the turnout was suspiciously high. The winner got 7-point-something million votes. In physical terms, did 7 million Kenyans vote in the second election? I'm just asking a question.
I want us to take a break.
Can I ask 2 more questions in relation to that?
You'll ask 10
questions. 1, can elections be stolen? Are elections stolen? Are results interfered with? I would say yes. Is it a safe route? Is there a guarantee that electronic will give us an election that is not possible to tamper with? No. Does it mean that manual will give us an election that is not possible to tamper with? No. So electronic or manual, either way,
we're cooked.
You can still, the results can still be tinkered with.
True.
So either way, what is more important is, 1, the system, yes, manual or electronic or whichever, but fundamentally, those who are using it. If you have, because machines, the electronic system cannot collude on itself, cannot tamper with the outcome. The manual cannot tamper with the outcome on itself. It is the people who manage the processes, who tinker with the numbers. And they tinker with the numbers because there's a collusion, right from the contestants to the referee to the voters. That's it. It's a collusion across board. Right. So what we should be actually dealing with is not necessarily the system. It should be the users of the system.
Absolutely. So it's a user problem. Let's
take
a break. When we come back, there's one more thing we want to talk about, and that is the issue of the ballot papers. Jamila has the numbers for us. And again, possibly another row when it comes to the printing of ballot papers. So the first batch came in today. But pia hapo kuna maneno. We'll be right back.
Ini town ya maneno.